Welcome. You're on the Daily Objective. I'm Jonathan Honig from capitalistpig.com. Delighted to be having you join us today, and also delighted to be joined with a great friend of mine and someone I learn a lot from and really enjoy speaking with on a regular basis now, Mr. Mark Pellegrino, actor and an activist. And you know, Mark, when you think about activists, you think about environmental activists, but you're an activist for something much more important, something we talk about here on the Daily Objective, that is the right ideas.
I hope so. I'm an activist for a reason, so we'll see how far that takes me.
Well, good. And we're looking forward to interacting with our audience today on the YouTube chat as well, because we're celebrating, or I guess I should say the Twittersphere is celebrating. Did you know that it is International Men's Day today? It's an international event celebrated on the 19th of November.
Yeah.
And this is, you know, when this was brought to my attention, I thought this was kind of a, because it seems like it's National Bacon Day, it's International Silent Movie Day. Every day is a so-called day to celebrate, but this is a so-called holiday that goes back actually a number of decades. I'm quoting now from Wikipedia. Is it an occasion to celebrate boys and men's achievements and contributions, in particular for their contributions to nation, society, community, family, marriage, and child care. And this has been getting a lot of attention in the press and on Twittersphere as well, and a lot of focus on that. And Mark, when I read that specific kind of identification, that this is a day to celebrate men, okay, the gender, but what their achievement? No, their achievement to society, their achievement to childcare, their achievement to the nation. So just the whiff of it, to me, smelt a little collectivist, which repels me. And my 2 cents, and I'm really curious about, something tells me you're not celebrating this maybe as enthusiastically as others are. My 2 cents is that this notion of taking pride, and objectivism talks a lot about pride, and it took me many years, I think, to really understand some sense of what pride really can be. But the idea of having a pride in your gender, something that you didn't choose, I don't think you can affect. This is something that was chosen, in fact, by random, just like your color. It's like, can you really take any pride in being male? So my thought for saluting International, Men's Day would be not to salute men in the big picture, but individual men. And Rand talks about this. I think I can pull this up. Rand talks about being a man worshiper, but I don't think she would be celebrating, International Man's Day, but she talked about it, and I'm quoting now: the man worshipers, in my sense of the term, are those who seek man's highest potential and strive to actualize it. Man worshippers are those who are dedicated to the exaltation of man's self-esteem and the sacredness of his happiness on earth. So, I'll take this day and I'll celebrate some individual men, people we know, like Bezos, who makes my life better every day, Gates. Now, I threw this one on the list too, Lou Malnati. He's a pizza entrepreneur, a man who has changed my life for the better. And here's one kind of ripped from the headlines, Mark, a gentleman by the name of Ugur Sahin. Now, he's the CEO of BioNTech. Okay, he's a man. He's an immigrant, even more interestingly, to Germany, and his company, BioNTech, is the one that came up with this new coronavirus vaccine. They're partnering with Pfizer. So this is what turns me on, I think, to be honest, Mark, in the objectivist sense, not sexually necessarily, but when I see men and women, but people doing amazing things, improving my life, I will salute that today and every day.
Yeah, for sure. But we're out of step, aren't we? Because now you're supposed to take pride in biological determinism and things that are beyond your control. I thought pride was a sort of moral concept. How one esteemed one's actions in the world. It was a relationship to the self based on what you did. Right. So, and what you do is controllable. It's within your choice. It's within the realm of morality, unlike the color of your skin or your biological sex. And why is it that we have to celebrate one's contributions to the world? Why can't we celebrate what characteristics define what we consider to be a virtuous human being. I mean, Rand, in that little ditty that you shared, although I know she was literally a man worshiper, the idea of man, I'm taking from that little caption that you read, was sort of a universal humanity, and so she was celebrating universal humanity. But there are, I think, virtues that we all share, but that we can distinctly pin to manhood specifically, that are worthy of respect and adulation. And I don't think they necessarily have to do with contributions one makes to society. Those are the result of living those virtues, but I think it's the virtues that should be extolled, right? This is what we should put up in front of the country, not one's quote unquote contributions to the community.
It's so interesting.
What makes a good man? What makes a good man?
Yeah, and when I've listened to a lot of Dr. Peikoff's lectures and podcasts over the years, and I remember him mentioning this, that at some point there became this big idea of you couldn't say man anymore to talk about the species. It had to be man and woman, or he/she, and then the idea of exalt, Rand is exalting, in my opinion, here to speak, she's exalting men, but she's also exalting man, the species. And I think that's especially true now more than ever. I mean, of course, there's physiological differences between men and women. But, for example, something like farming, kind of pretty backbreaking, difficult work, you can have genius female farmers now. They're agro-scientists. They're creating on a scale that even some physically strong man could never create. So I think, there's an endless rabbit hole we can go down to in like definitions of masculinity and femininity, but like, I just wake up every day in awe of what man can do. His muscles, yeah, okay, sure, right? And there's beautiful athletes, men and women, but the mind, oh my God, what people come up with is crazy. It's amazing. It makes my life better every day. So celebrate those individual achievements, as you said, not some friggin' gender or species.
So now is International Man Day going to incorporate women as well who achieve great things? Because we're talking about man, the species, as opposed to men, the sex. What do you call it now? Do you call it sex or gender? I don't know what isn't gender now supposed to be a spectrum, a sort of psychological phenomenon or cultural phenomenon? It's sex that's biologically determined. I don't know how to.
Let me ask you, you've portrayed some, I never think of myself as particularly, I never think about manly in a sense. I feel like I have my own style and I kind of stick to it. But, you've portrayed some very masculine men, some very, just some great characters. And part of this International Men's Day seems to be promoting this notion that, we can be vulnerable as men. We can kind of let our guard down. We can go to therapy. We can express our emotions. What do you make of that? And how do you digest all of that?
I think that's a movement for the good. I think that the cultural phenomenon that imposed stoicism on men, like any development, has two sides to it: a dark side and a light side. There is a degree to which not living by your emotions, as we as objectivists understand, is a very positive, pro-life way of approaching life. But there's also an element to that could bleed into suppression and repression of feeling and lead to blind spots and disowned elements of your own personality that are very unhealthy. So for a man to be vulnerable, I think it's not only emotionally open, it not only is healthier psychologically, but I think a vulnerable man comes from a strong place. If you're not afraid to be vulnerable, it's because your moral base and your self-esteem are not fragile, right? So I mean, the characters I've played in TV are what you would consider toxically masculine, right? They're overcompensating for something that they don't have by aggression, and using their muscles instead of their minds. So I feel like
it's interesting how you're able to really get inside their head, even from the outside, and say, and I'm glad you made that point about emotions because, so oftentimes people say, oh, objectivist, you're just like Dr. Spock, just like, oh, you're a computer, da da da. And it's so not true, because I feel like the more I learn about objectivism, in some sense, the more emotional I get. I feel like I feel the world a lot more intensely. Now, I'm not
Sure.
driven by those emotions, so they don't kind of drive me moment to moment, but they affect me and they make my life, I think, even more richer and more. I could think of so many objectivists. Ayn Rand, probably the most obvious, who get very emotional and very because we take life seriously. We know that each moment is so precious, and this idea of men having to be, I guess, stoic or wrap that all up. I mean, what a great world we live in now, Mark, where there's so much affluence that we can actually take some time to think about as men or as just human being, like our feelings, speak with counselors, speak with therapists. I mean, I think I hear you alluding to that. I think it's a very positive thing. I mean, Nathaniel Branden, of course, was excommunicated, but there was a lot of positive work done about the psychology of self-esteem and the importance of that as part of a thriving life. So I think a lot of the so-called therapists and male therapists are kind of charlatans. So do your own due diligence, but absolutely, men should not run from their emotions. They should embrace them, but know their place.
Sure. Yeah, and I think as an objectivist, you do feel more strongly about things because your values are clearer to you. You've thought about your values, you've rooted them to reality, and rooted them in here in a way that most people don't. So I can understand why clarity of value would make you feel more strongly about things.
Well, let me ask you kind of a seeming another rip from the headlines idea. This perception of masculinity. Candace Owens, who is seemingly kind of out there everywhere, got a little flack. I guess Harry Styles, now I don't really know who these people are, I just read about them in the Daily Mail, was on the cover of Vogue wearing a dress, or wearing kind of a very feminine outfit. And this is something that's been seen a lot in recent years, Mark, kind of gender bending, men wearing more women's clothes. How do you interpret that within this whole idea of, male worship a la Rand, and also just, International Men's Day? Can you be a strong man and pose on the cover of Vogue in a dress?
I wouldn't think about crossing William Wallace when he wore a kilt. He could probably split me in half with a broadsword, and nor would I cross a centurion who wore a toga or some version of that. Or a hoplite, or any number of warriors that dressed in ways that we would consider today to be quote unquote feminine. It's not the dress that makes you feminine. There's a degree to which these breaking these boundaries, I think, is very healthy, but I don't know that that's the motivation behind it. I think what's driving it is something else. Is this social constructivist perspective of everything, and this attempt to subjectivize everything. That's dangerous, but a man wearing a dress on a fashion shoot to break gender barriers and is not on its face something that disturbs me. I think it can be very interesting, provided the driving force behind it isn't an attempt to destroy things, to break things down, but to put another perspective, or to grow a perspective on what men are capable of, or how we
Yeah.
do it.
I mean, at the end of the day, part of what is objectivism has helped me, is given me a lot of the tools of understanding. For me, what I always felt like for myself, for example, I was brought up Jewish and raised in a Jewish family, but from day one, I really repelled against this idea that, like, I am part of this thing that I didn't choose. I didn't have any choice. And that would be my one kind of thought when things come along like International Men's Day is, take some pride in your own accomplishment, what you've done or what individual men have done, but to kind of pat yourself on the back for being born a particular gender just seems like such a backward way of living and a false type of pride that really isn't going to get you very far at the end of the day.
I sort of agree with that, but they're also defining these groups by the amount of pain and suffering they experience. I think Razi showed us a list of suffering that men endure, and so you take today out to recognize that and try to make them feel
Well,
better.
what do you mean suffering? What is that suffering?
Oh, higher suicide rates and abuse and being subjected to more physical harm, death, that kind of thing. Men engage in riskier behavior. I don't like defining people by suffering. That's definitely an anti-objectivist perspective. We like life, and we like, we focus on virtues as opposed to these determinant factors. But there is something to be said for recognizing that other people hurt, and it's okay to reach out to them, right?
And you've done that. You've done that so many times. You've been involved with program after program. I've bought a few of your shirts, and you engage in really interesting type of philanthropy that really helps to lift people up with demonstrable effect.
Yeah, and especially with men, I think men are being attacked pretty intensely in this day and age. And I think it's important for people, especially those motivated by this social justice activism, to recognize that suffering is sort of a ubiquitous thing. We all are subjected to some type of suffering, and it's important to recognize that in another person, not just men, but in other people. That's part of how we build what Peter Boghossian calls golden bridges. You recognize where the other person's coming from, and you can bridge gaps between each other by recognizing that stuff. So yeah, recognize that men hurt too.
Yeah. I mean, there's a part of what's so amazing about the internet is that obviously you can connect with people all over the world. There's an African objectivist club, group, organization. Who knows? Maybe it's 7 guys. This is not pejorative, but like literally in a hut somewhere. It's a small movement who are getting a taste of the right ideas. Getting a taste maybe of some of those ideas that could inspire them to change their lives and change the world. And I think that's what's so fascinating, Mark, is like, there's no difference fundamentally between like Cuba and Miami or North Korea to South Korea, or, I believe there's no reason that someone who's fundamentally depressed, for example, can't improve his or her life in some way if they have the right ideas. So many young people now, especially, have been, I think, raised on, that a victimhood mentality of whatever their hood is. They're going to find a way a victim of it. And, objectivism has just helped me realize how special and precious every moment of life is. And, maybe I'm not going to be 100 millionaire, maybe, but I'm going to make every moment of my life count as a man, as an individual, as a sentient being on this earth. And that's what, to me, counts at the end of the day.
I couldn't agree more. I wish more people embraced that philosophy. You'd see a lot more happiness out there in the world.
Well, that's definitely what it's, at the end of the day, all about, is promoting happiness. And I think I speak for you when I say that, a lot of these objectivist ideas and following the Ayn Rand Center UK and subscribing to our YouTube channel more than anything is a great way to start. Ideas are what move the world. It's not politics. It's not scarce resources. It's how you think. That's what makes philosophy so cool, so special, so important. And thank you for spending even a few moments of your day talking about it with us. So don't miss tomorrow's show, because we're going to be talking, especially if you're an objectivism, we're going to be talking with James Valiant about first of all, he's a fascinating guy. He's a published author, The Brandons to the BBC, The History of Ayn Rand Smears. And James Valiant is just a really interesting guy, well-known objectivist, and you're really going to enjoy tomorrow's program. So don't miss that. And Mark, I hope our paths cross once again very soon.
I think they will.
I think you're a great man, and I just think you're a great guy. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Likewise, right back at you.
All right, and to all of our viewers, male, otherwise, and undecided, thank you for joining us, and we'll be with you again soon.